And now it's time for me to introduce the next session for the day. And it gives me immense pleasure to welcome on board our session chair for the next session. None other than Amit Mukherjee, Senior Assistant Editor, The New India Express. Please put your hands together for Amit Mukherjee. Bajado, tali bajado. Next up, joining Amit Mukherjee, we have Kamna Hazrati, founder, KH Advisory. Can we please have Kamna Hazrati on stage? Welcome, ma'am. Next up, joining Kamna, we have Nandini Chatterjee, Chief Marketing and Communication Officer, PwC India. Huge round of applause for Nandini Chatterjee. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome on board. Joining all of them, we have Nivedita Moirangthem. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Country Communication Manager, IKEA India. Please put your hands together for Nivedita. Ma'am, can we please have you on stage? If you can hear me, can we please have you on stage? All right. Okay, so we have Nivedita ma'am here virtually with us as she couldn't be here in person. And the subject for this panel is talent development and retention, crisis management in the age of social media, the need to be agile as well as transparent, as it is very important to understand the age of social media and of course the crisis management. I would request all of you to please take it over. Ma'am, can you see us, hear us? Nivedita ma'am?
Hi Nivedita, can you hear us?
We can't hear her. I would request our team to kindly check the audio. You can hear us, it seems. Okay,
Yes.
okay. Oh yes, the audio is here. Fantastic. Thank you so much and over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can already see there's a crisis out here in this hall. You know, if somebody takes a picture and puts it out, it'll say people have run out of steam to actually get into the crisis that we have. Anyway, so crisis management in the age of digital media and social media, that is something very important, because you know, if you look at the entire concept of crisis, that has kind of changed over the last 10-15 years, and all the corporates are now looking at redefining everything from the way they have been handling crisis, because crisis in the new age, when everything is out on Twitter, reputation damage is being done within a matter of minutes. So people who are actually handling crisis at this, in this new era, they really need to be agile. They need to be active 24/7. And if you look at some of the examples, like for example, if you look at how Mahindra has been dealing with crisis, you know, everything has gone now digital. The crisis is also a digital entity right now, because everything we see, it happens on a digital platform, and it doesn't really take much time to dent your reputation or, everything that you have done, built over the past 5 years or 10 years, it just goes down the drain. So, crisis managers now, vis-a-vis what used to be 10 years back, they have a much bigger role to perform. They need to be very active 24/7 on the duty, and one needs to understand what plays out well. Now, I'll start this conversation with Nandini. She has been handling crisis for the last, I think, 20 years now. She heads the communications at PwC. My first question, can somebody help with the...
Hello. Yeah, this one. It's working. This one is working.
So, Nandini, I would like to ask you how this entire transition in dealing with crisis has happened. I'm sure you must have handled crisis 20 years back, and I'm sure you're doing it now also. So what exactly has changed in this entire way of handling crisis?
So, Amit, thank you very much for laboring on the 20 years back. Thankfully, you didn't say 30 years back. Okay, but yeah, a lot has changed and a lot has not changed. I think one, we are all aware of digital, so it's become so complex. I think I hardly need to labor on that point that it's there and it was not there earlier. And if anything hits digital, it can just catch fire. How you handle it, the nuances are a little different. I think the second thing to my mind is that it's a connected world. You know, so something might happen, say, in the remote corner of the country, and suddenly you find it's flared up in Canada. So, as for example, we in 157 countries, we are monitoring what is happening in every country because from one country it gets picked up. Bloomberg does a story and now it's published across all countries, you know. So we actually circulate scenarios to all the 157 country crisis managers, have a central point of contact still that, okay, this is where you escalate. I think the third, like I mentioned, is the real time that we were not doing this earlier. Now you are literally having to real time. So we have, for example, a WhatsApp group of a few key people where anything and everything which is negative, which is being talked about in the brand, gets escalated. Now you may not fight your battles on social media. You will figure out how to go behind and handle, and that's a different thing. But real-time monitoring has become very essential. And I would imagine fourth, which we saw just now, the virtual influencers, you know, which you all heard of. They were never there. And some of you may have seen, just today there was, it was reported about, the ketchup brand. And you must have seen videos of the influencer talking and about the health drink. I mean, the power of the influencers. And how do you even manage? You saw how the health drink managed or did not manage, and how the ketchup has managed. You know, so there is so much of thought. But I think what has not changed is the fact that you need to have a core action team. You need to have protocols, you need to have processes, you need to have spokespersons, you need to have a policy. Ideally, you need to have scenario planning done in advance. You need to know how you will go about responding to things like that. And you need to be very sensitive
Right,
to
right.
handling such things.
So yes, she made a very important point that in the age of social media, influencers are playing a very, very important role. They can either build a reputation or they can tarnish it at within a just a tweet of theirs. So my question to Nivedita would be Nivedita, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear. Can
So,
you hear me?
so you are dealing with you are associated with a company which is more into B2C, right? So your
Yes.
interactions with customers are very, very, regular. You interact with customers are on a more regular basis. And the feedback of customers, like Indian customers who are like so informed right now, they never take a second to before putting out a tweet if they are not satisfied with their product. So my question to
Yes.
you would be, when you are devising a plan for your company, a communication plan, how much emphasis do you put on ensuring that the crisis doesn't happen? When you're building a social media plan, do you keep in mind that I have to ensure that the crisis doesn't happen? Do you have some preemptive measures taken?
Well, I think just to build on what was said earlier, uh, being prepared is one of the best ways in how we could avoid future crisis. But sometimes it's not enough to plan. Sometimes we need to be ready to face the crisis as they come, because like you said, when it is customer centric topics, so when we're working with customers, we need to be prepared all the time, right, to stay agile. So for us, it's very important that we are keeping the whole organization aware, not just the communication teams or the social media teams, but co-workers on the shop floor who are dealing with customers day in and day out. They need to be prepared. They need to know how to work with customers. The issues can be real, or sometimes customers just get angry. But how do we deal with different kinds of situations is one of the things that we are
Right,
working with regularly. But to say that we are always prepared for future crisis is not true.
right.
Sometimes they come as they is,
No,
you know.
again, I completely
unexpectedly.
agree with you, Nivedita, because preparedness is one very, very important thing, and being alert
Yes.
while dealing with customers is also very important. So the moment somebody puts out a negative tweet, I mean, it's the important role of the crisis manager to immediately try to dial it down. Uh, yeah, to engage with the adverse sort of tweets which are put out, or whatever, posts which are put out in the social media. Okay, now
Yes,
I
yes.
I'll now get to Kamna. See, all crisis management using social media has been a priority for all the top corporate houses. Now, in the age where we also have a lot of startups, so how do you think that reputation of these startups are managed by using social media? I think even when there's a crisis that happens in a startup, I mean the stakes are much higher, and so how do you deal with that? Because a lot of funding is dependent on the reputation of a company. So
Thank you, Amit. Yeah, thank you. So, as you rightly said, for startups, the impact is much higher, and it can actually, the teams are smaller, and the impact is, the impact or the entire outcome of this crisis can actually become very big and very difficult to handle. For startups especially, they do lack a proper structure to be built in. So maybe a social media team is running the social media, post or Instagram or tweets, but at the same time, as a startup, we do not this this strategy of planning crisis, or how to manage a crisis if it may happen, that is sometimes which is not there. We don't think it through, or we don't even reach there, right? And neither do we have a capacity or the capability to have a full team to manage it, vis-a-vis a full-grown, a bigger company. So, of course, that is a more problematic area for startups. And yes, like rightly agreeing to what you're saying, it has a direct impact on, it can have a direct impact on your revenue bottom line. It can have, on your reputation, whatever you have done so far. So yes.
so again, so you mean to say even startups? I mean, since their stakes are higher, I mean, more than larger corporates, I think it's important for startups to have a sort of a crisis communications. Right. Nandita, I'll get back to you. Hello. Yeah.
Amit,
Uh,
if I may, just on one point, you
yeah.
said about dialing down crisis.
Yeah.
I want to just make a point over there. It is not important to immediately start dialing down a crisis. And we had an instance, I remember, where somebody very important went onto his own personal handle and said something which was negative about the firm and about some work that we were doing. And we realized that that was a work that we were not doing at all. So now the immediate reaction was to go on social media and say, hey, you got your facts wrong. We're not doing this work. But what we did was that while it started really flying on social media, and there were about 180 retweets, and you can imagine, 180, even one retweet is a lot. And depending on who's retweeting,
Things get
we
amplified.
held our guns to see what is the conversation that is happening and realize none of the conversation was our organization mentioned. It was actually moving on to some other direction. Had we put out, tried to dial it down by putting a response by saying, but you got your facts wrong, we've not done this work, all of them would have come back to us, and then started going after us. So it's very important to wait, watch, and see.
Right, a very
And
calibrated
yeah,
approach.
very calibrated.
Yeah, so you need not respond immediately. You take your own time and gauge the situation. Great. Again, Nandini, the general perception about crisis is mostly it is triggered by external factors. But of late, in the age of social media, we are also seeing that there are crises which gets triggered due to your own stuff sometimes. It's very internal. So have you ever faced those kind of situations
In fact, on the
where it has been triggered by your own staff, a crisis,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
because
So
nowadays people have access to social media. Everybody
totally,
has access.
Totally, totally. So on the WhatsApp group, which I was just mentioning a short while earlier, on a real-time basis, there are a lot of these posts which come where it could be my people manager has not treated me well, or I went for an interview and I was not happy with that, or let's say you'll find somebody said it's the work environment is not good, and I've seen those also. Drivers don't have a proper place, to say, and somebody's picked up the cause. Now, there is a way to handle it, and it's not as if you need to fight it out on social media, and there will be a lot like this. And the second one is when you are doing your campaigns, your advertising campaigns, and you may have seen of this leading brand which had MCBC, and it was chicken, burger chicken, and what cheese chicken or something like that. And in fact, today it was on a take on environment, World Environment Day, and Kachra, and he was linking that up and got a lot of flack. So you need to be also sensitive internally that what are you putting out? How are you reacting? There was a case you may remember on Kashmir Day, where a leading company in Pakistan had put out a solidarity post. But then it blew in their face because the same company is all over the world. Right. And so it was picked up in India. So again, sensitizing your staff on how to go about things is very, very important.
So there has to be some sort of a discipline, etiquette as far as using social media.
I would like to just add on here, Amitji, that we spend so much time for building external culture and external communication, but also a lot of time has to be spent in building the internal communication, right? So what Nandini ji was saying, that this internal communication is so very important. We spend so much time that how will my social media team work, but if my staff member goes out and talks about how the culture of the company is, there are so many attributes which can go hayway. So as a company, it is important to understand the culture of the entire.
So again, sensitizing your staff.
Absolutely.
That's most. So Nivedita, again, getting back to you, you are dealing with a very potentially crisis sort of this thing, because anybody who is into either service industry or consumer durables, they get a lot of flack from the social media sort of posts and all. So how much priority nowadays do you give to crisis communication, managing it on the social media when you're planning out your the overall communication strategy?
Yeah. I'd like to answer this in a different way. While we talk about crisis that can happen potentially on social media, we also believe that as part of our communication plan, and not only in India, but it's something that we adopt globally as well, we believe that we need to empower our co-workers. So we have an initiative which has just started, which is called Creating Social Media Advocates among our co-workers, so that, while crisis can happen, but it's also important to have brand ambassadors who can stand up for you and talk about the positive things. So that we're able to mitigate any kind of negative impact that can happen due to a crisis. So that's one of the things that we actively are onto as part of the communication planning. Then, while anything can happen, it's also important, like was said earlier, to find out what the truth is before reacting. Because if it is not true, then of course, you will have a lot of support from either, people who trust, or people who are engaged from internal or external among your customers, who will stand by you. So it's really important to also create the positive side of how we can utilize the power of social media to be able to fight when there is a crisis. Right. So I'd just like to place that.
May I add one small tip on what one could do? So many of you who've been handling situations, let's say you've been in a company for 5 years, and typically you'll find comms people, we are handling crisis many, many times. What is practical is, can we make a list of all crises and bucket them to see multiple situations, work on scenarios for that, work on statements, keep your legal approvals and all in place. So you already covered 60% or 70% of your track, so that when a crisis happens, there is a very high probability none of those will happen. But there is a probability something near that may happen. So you have already put some thought and you're not grappling. And you've also got a thought that something like this has to go through whom all, what is the protocol, it really will help if one was to do that?
Yeah, so preempting a crisis is also a very integral part of a crisis manager's role. Yeah, so I mean, if we look at it, I think social media is, I mean, it's a very sort of a dynamic platform. It behaves as a demon also, which gives rise to a crisis. At the same time, it's a gladiator also, which you can use properly to kind of, contain that crisis situation. So it can work either ways. Again, I would like to ask you, going forward, you just mentioned about a crisis protocol. So in the age of social media, how do you actually look at kind of outlining a preemptive sort of a crisis communication protocol, keeping the social media in mind?
See, I think the basics still remain the same. You know, you have a core action committee or a team, your policies are defined, what you need to be saying, who needs to be saying, how do you go about it, all that is already defined. Then you have to just be alert and agile and keep your ear to the ground and be sensitive, like I said in the beginning, and decide what you need to be doing. You know, it's crisis is like you. I know you asked Nivedita also how do you prepare for it, but I think many times it is more of how do you manage at that time? How do you
Right.
think? How do you get your facts right?
Right.
And sometimes, believe me, you need to take a risk.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not as if
Nothing is
you
sure
do
shot.
this and it will all work right. It can blow in the face also, but you need to take calculated risks and move forward.
Okay. So
If I can
Nivedita,
just,
hi,
yeah,
please.
I just wanted to add here, especially in a case of a startup, right? When you're saying it's more of templatizing, how to manage crisis. And if you look at it, it's kind of a thermometer. So every time, so one is, we identify there is a problem or there's a crisis. That's a very clear distinction. I might have a problem with my ride. Say I'm taking Ola, I have a problem with my ride. That's a problem. But if I have a safety issue, that can become a crisis, right? So that sensitization of what these two things can be is very important. Second is, like as managers, we have so many social listening tools now available.
Right.
You can use Hootsuite, you can use, Locobus. There are so many social tools available to listen to what is, being talked about for your brand. Uh, Having that structure built in, it's a 6, 7 steps kind of a process that, okay, these are the tools I'm going to use
Deploy,
to
yeah.
measure, what is happening in my ecosystem. And then, from say a social media executive to maybe the founder of a company, because for a startup especially, if it, if something goes out of the way and the founder comes in and they are talking about it and they are addressing it and, agreeing to it and confirming it and then trying to solve it, it kinds of builds more trust
So-
and boils down,
So
the
very interesting
situation.
point. So you mount a surveillance on the social media, gamut,
Right.
ecosystem to get a sense of what is being talked about your brand, so
Right.
that you can also kind of devise a response to. So Nivedita, would you like to take that forward? I mean, what just we talked about, like how we keep a tab of what is happening with
Yes.
respect to our brand. What is the general sense?
Yes. So we do have the regular monitoring, and we get it from our monitoring partners, etc. But it's important that we have that, but it's important to also keep track of what is the most relevant and how we can be best prepared. And like I said, best prepared doesn't mean that we are trained to mitigate the risk or avoid the risk, but it's how to also. Sometimes we do have, as part of media trainings or communication trainings, scenario playouts or role plays, so that we are able to get a sense of what to do when it happens. So it's we do have a tab on what's happening, but it's also important to understand the realities of our business internally, on what can happen. And this is really important because this also helps us not only for the team who are working with it, but for the whole organization to be prepared when
Right.
something happens. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And just to add, I think it's very important to sensitize your leadership on how to stay calm.
Yes.
Because when social media goes
that is again-
berserk, that's the leadership who kind of you need to help them go through it.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so sensitizing them is a very, very key issue. Again, coming back to the fact that we see a lot of corporate rivalries now in apart from genuine crisis, there's a lot of corporate plants that happen, where your rivals are planting in information just to tarnish your sort of reputation. Nivedita, I think that is very relevant as far as your industry is concerned, your line of business is concerned. So how do you deal with that corporate rivalries in the social media?
I wouldn't say we have had so much of that, but I can give you an example of what we are facing currently. It's regarding fake websites, for example. People promoting their own products by using our logo or by using our brand. In such cases, of course, it's important to have your dialogues with the legal teams and what's going on with the digital team on what next steps to take. But it's first of all, I think the foundation is that we need to stay calm, because a lot of things can happen unexpectedly, but also to be honest about what we are telling our customers, or what we're telling our audiences or stakeholders out there. So we are facing that as a live example I can give you, but we have put out a message saying, trust us, we are available on these platforms only. So yeah, and then of course, we have several, other teams like legal or the digital team who will take it up in another way. So it's not just the message that goes out on social media, but important to know that if there are issues that are involving other stakeholders, it's important to take it with them offline as well and close the loop so that it doesn't happen again.
Right.
So I can say that, corporate rivalry, not so much, but we are having to deal with this issue as of now, where we are, where we have a lot of, maybe companies who don't even exist who are using our brand name out there.
Right.
So that
That is also
harms,
another kind of crisis,
reputation.
actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So that's a trademark issue, more or less. Yep. Okay. So anybody who would you like to ask a question related to any problem that is being faced in, or you would like to share your experience when it comes to handling crisis in terms of social media? I think. Thanks. Thank you so much. So yeah. So the key takeaways are like, in the modern day, while we are handling crisis, we have to be very, very vigilant. We have to keep a surveillance mounted as to what is being talked about your brand, and preempt sort of responses accordingly. And definitely, it's a very fluid sort of a medium dealing. It's a big demon that we need to handle. But yeah, the whole art is to kind of turning that demon into a gladiator to solve the entire crisis. I think. Thank you so much for listening to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Once
Thank you,
again,
Nivedita.
please give it up for the entire panel. And of course, once again, Amit Mukherjee, Kamna Hazrati, Nandini Chatterjee, and of course, Nivedita ma'am, thank you for joining virtually. Thanks a lot. I would request all of you to please pose for the group photo.